So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go through and prime the machine with ink for the first time. So the first step to this procedure is to power the machine off by clicking the power button. Once the machine is completely powered down, we'll come around here to the back where our ink system is. Okay, you'll probably notice that even though we turn the power off of the machine, that our WIMS unit is still functioning. The reason being for that is so that way it has a constant power source, so that way it keeps this white ink circulating. Me personally, I leave the entire machine powered on when I'm not in use. It will hibernate. But if you do want to kill the power of the main machine, you're welcome to do that as well, as long as the machine stays plugged in. So, when we're loading up these inks, the first thing I want to do is disconnect my power source for the WIMS system. I'll just pull these two plugs apart. Okay. Now, sometimes there will be shipping fluid inside the tubing. I do, when I first power it up, like for the very first time, I do let that WIMS unit run, so that way that shipping fluid will end up in the bottom of the bottle. What you'll do with that stuff is just pour it down your drain. If there's a little bit of residue, it's okay. Alright, so I have my WIMS unit unplugged. The next thing I want to do is take the supplied empty clear bottles off of the machine. We can set these to the side and use them for flushing later on. So I'll go ahead and take all these individual bottles off. And then the supplied 8-ounce bottles that come with your starter kit will be placed on here instead. So we'll take the lids off, drop them down in their corresponding holes. Yellow will be first. What I like to do is spin the bottle so that way the lids or the tubing doesn't get all twisted up. Make sure it's nice and thumb tight. You don't have to over tighten, but do have it tight enough where it will hold air pressure. Do magenta next. If you hear your air pressure alarm go off, no worries, we'll reset that after we get all our inks on. Cyan will be next. And finally black. Okay. Once we have our CMYK bottles twisted on, we'll hit that reset button over here on the air pressure, which is you saw previously during the anatomy of the machine. Okay. We're not going to plug in the WIMS system yet for the simple fact that I do not want to waste a bunch of white ink. What the WIMS system does is circulate white ink past the head. So if there was white ink already up there by the head, and then we're trying to get the colored inks up there to the head, that means we will waste a bunch of white ink that's unnecessary. So during this initial prime up, I will make sure to have this unplugged. But I can add the white ink into the machine. Out of the box, you will want to agitate your white ink by swirling it for at least probably minute or two. So that way it gets any of the separation down at the bottom of the bottle mixed back up into the ink. We don't really want to shake the bottle because it will aerate it and cause a lot of foaming inside there. So I'll just swirl it. Once I've done so, take my lid off, tilt up my lid on the WIMS reservoir, and fill the reservoir up. I don't fill it all the way to the brim. I'll fill it up to about this first line right here, where it basically curves down. Okay. recap that for later use. Spin the bottle on. Okay. So now that I have my inks ready, I will go up to my control panel and we will initiate our maintenance mode. Now that we've put our ink bottles onto the bulk ink system in the back, we're going to come around here and put the machine into a maintenance mode. First, you're going to have to power the machine off, which we did earlier, and then we'll hold these 3 right buttons, the reverse, the next, and the forward, all at the same time, and then keep holding them until the power comes on and we hear 3 little quick beeps. Once it comes up and says check test, we're in the maintenance mode. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to raise our lid up and then we'll notice that the test comes up to RAM capacity, or it could read another message. What I'll do from here is hit cancel, so that way it gets back to check test. So then I'm going to go over to my cleaning menu, so that way I can get to an ink charge. An ink charge is basically going to cause the capping station to suck on the print head, pulling the inks from the bottle and priming the nozzles of the print head. To get to it, we'll hit the next key until it gets to cleaning, then hit enter. The print head will do a mini head cleaning. Once it finishes that, the message on the control panel will read clean normal. We'll hit our next arrow. It goes from normal to a long clean to an ink charge to a little charge, and then cycles back around to normal again. So what we're going to be using is the ink charge. Once I hit enter, the print head or the capping station will start the suction process. As you can see, some of the shipping fluid is being pumped down through the machine. And if we come back here to the back, we can see that the ink is now coming out of each of the CMYK bottles, as well as the white. Now we'll go back over here to the front. I'll raise my lid back up. That way I can look at my ink harness and the ink tubes and watch the ink flow up there towards the head. A typical ink charge will take anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. Make sure when you're doing the ink charges, it'll read ink charge on the control panel. Until it reads a different message, it is still doing that initial ink charge. There is a long pause in the middle, and then the machine will start doing its ink charge again. For this initial priming of ink, you may have to do more than one ink charge to properly prime the printer. So, once it's finished, on the control panel, it'll have the next message, clean little charge, which was the one after the regular charge. So what I can do to go back to do a full charge is hit the back arrow, and it'll go back to ink charge again. I'll press enter one more time to do a second ink charge to finish getting the ink up to the head. As you can see, we start noticing the inks going into the dampers and then following through and going to the head. You got your black, your cyan, your magenta, and your yellow. Depending on how much air is in the tubing, some of them may move slower than others. We also have our white coming in from one side of the circulation system, and then distributing down through the 4 dampers of each one of the white channels. Now that we have ink up here in the tubings, all of them, we're going to go back to the back and we're going to turn on our circulation system now. Coming back here to the back, we'll take our 2 plugs, plug them both in together. Our circulation system will come on, and it'll fill up the second tube, and basically pull this ink back in, completing the circle of the circulation system. And then we'll go back over here to the front of the machine. Since we turned on our circulation system, the ink will now be coming through these tubes, and you'll notice that white ink will be in both the return and the supply tube. So depending on when these inks get up to the head for the first time without the WIM system plugged in, is depending on whether you need to do another ink charge or not. Once we have the inks up there to the head, that's when I can plug in my circulation system. Now that that second ink charge has finished, I've verified that I have ink in all my tubes, and then I'll go back over here to the control panel, and it will read clean little charge. So we have now charged our ink, or our machine, with fresh ink. So the next step is to power the machine off and then power up normally. Once everything turns off, click the power button again, and it will power up in the normal mode. It'll do its normal startup process, do a little mini head cleaning. And then it will park itself on top of the capping station. And now we have the message paper in. So, just because we did an ink charge does not mean that it actually primes the crystals in the actual head itself. Like I said before, what an ink charge does is basically use the capping station to suck on the print head, pulling the ink from the bottles. The thing that actually primes the crystals of the print head will be a head cleaning. To do a head cleaning from our control panel is really simple. We'll come over and we'll hold our enter button for 3 seconds to initiate a cleaning. It'll come up and do a normal head cleaning. During this initial prime up of the inks, I will want to do 2 head cleanings and then walk away from the machine for about 5 minutes to let the ink, the bubbles inside the ink settle and raise to the top. After that 5 minutes, I'll come back in and do 1 more head cleaning and then do my first nozzle check. Now that we've let our machine sit for 5 minutes, we're going to come back in and we're going to do our last head cleaning and then a nozzle check. One of the things you have to know is that before I can actually do a head cleaning, I need to make sure that my tray bed is in the loaded position. So to do this, I'll come over here, hit my load button. It'll draw the bed in. And then our load light will go green. With this green light, that means that now I can do a head cleaning. So I'll come up here, hold my enter button for 3 seconds until it does a head cleaning. After this head cleaning, we will do our initial nozzle check. So, what a head cleaning is actually doing, the capping station is sucking on the print head, the wiper blade will slide out, and then the print head will slide across the wiper blade like a squeegee, drawing any kind of ink out of those nozzles, priming them up and getting them ready for printing. All the waste ink goes down into your waste ink bottle. A typical head cleaning will take about 2 minutes. Once it is finished, the print head will dock back onto the capping station and lock into place. Okay, so now we're going to do our first nozzle check to check the status of our print head. So what I'll do is eject the bed. I'll take my adult platens, slide them onto the machine. Okay. And then what we prefer using is a transparency sheet, which can be purchased up at an office supply store. This way I can see both my color ink and my white ink. If I used a piece of paper, I would not be able to see the status of my white channel nozzles. So what I'll do is place this on top of this first adult platen, and I will hang it off the edge about a ½ inch on the front and back. I will manually push the tray bed in until I get it to the plastic. Then I'll come over here to my bed buttons and hold the up button until it stops. Then let go and the light will be green. Then I'll come over, hit load to get it into the ready state. Once it is loaded, the light will go green. Now what we'll do is come over to the control panel and we'll initiate a nozzle check. We'll hit menu once. It'll say test plot. I'll hit the enter button once. I don't want to do a setup plot, so I'll hit the reverse or up arrow here till it says nozzle check. Hit enter. So then the printer will actually go through its process of printing the nozzle check pattern. The only thing that a nozzle check does is give you a pattern to let you know the status of the head. It does not actually prime the nozzles or get it ready for printing. That is what head cleanings are used for. Okay. So now if I look at my nozzle check, I notice that I have some broken nozzles. If I hold it above a white piece of paper, I can see my colors. I see a couple breaks in there, a bunch of breaks in the blue, a couple in the magenta, and then I'll probably have to hold it up to the light to see the yellow because it's really faint. Then if I put it onto a dark background, I can see my whites, which this one is close to perfect, and these right here have a bunch of broken nozzles. So if you get a nozzle check pattern like this, that means it's misfiring, especially when you get a brand new printer. It's basically air bubbles inside of the printer. So what I do to troubleshoot this is do probably 3 more head cleanings and then another nozzle check. I'll just leave this one on here and then spin this paper around backwards so that way I can compare the first one to the second one.